Hello, everyone. We are now going to go into chapter 4 of the book of Esther. And if you've missed any of the lessons, please go back. The first lesson is shown with a picture of a throne chair. The second lesson is shown with a picture of pillows. The third lesson is shown with a picture of a rope. And this lesson, of course, is a picture of a gate. As we ended the last lesson that we did, chapter 3, I asked you all some questions. The first one was, who got a promotion? That was Haman. I hope you got all these questions correct. The second one was, who would Mordecai not bow to? Haman is the answer. Does the book of Esther mention God? No. Where do we first see respect for the Lord in the book of Esther? We see it right here where Mordecai would not bow to Haman. How did Haman take the rejection from Mordecai? He hated him, and he was ready to kill him and all the Jews because of it. What did Haman want Mordecai to do? What did Haman want to do to Mordecai? He wanted to kill him and his people. Who were the certain people that Haman told the king about? They were the Jews. What is a decree? A decree is a letter that is sent out by the king and sealed with his signet. It cannot be revoked. What is a signet ring? A signet ring is a personal seal of the king, sealing the decrees and any other important kingly documents. What did Haman decide to do to the Jews? He decided to have them killed. Did Haman know that the queen was a Jew? No. Who drank all the time? Haman and the king. All right, we're going to move on to chapter 4, verse 1. Let's see how Mordecai reacted when he found out that Haman wanted to kill him and all his people. In verse 1, it says, when Mordecai learned all that happened, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city, and he cried with a loud, bitter cry. Verse 2, he went as far as the front of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. Now, sackcloth is a rough, coarse type of cloth that's usually made out of goat's hair. I always think of it as like a burlap sack. It's really not, but it's like that. It's not a comfortable garment. And it was very common for people to put on sackcloth and ashes when they were in mourning. Here again, when you're in mourning like that, you're praying out to the Lord. So Mordecai tore off his good clothes and he dressed like this. He put on dirty ashes on his body. He went to the city where he cried bitterly. You know, why do you believe Mordecai put on such a heartfelt show of grief? Of course, the answer is he probably feels responsible because he wouldn't bow to Haman. Haman's going to kill all of his people. I experienced this one time in my life where someone was treating a child very bad, and this child's parents were not in the area. I intercepted for the child, and the person that was hurting this child became angry at me. Yet I did nothing. It was the man that was hurting the child that did what he did. It wasn't what I did. He was responsible for what he did. The same as this situation. Haman is responsible for killing the Jews, not Mordecai. Mordecai would never want the Jews killed, but he feels responsible because he wouldn't bow to Haman. It's too bad that Haman just would not let it go. So, in verse 3, in the meantime, while Mordecai is mourning in sackcloth and ashes, in verse 3 it says, in every provinces where the king's command and decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews. Their mourning and Mordecai's mourning. The Jews are getting the letter stating that they're going to be killed pretty soon. They do have some time before it happens, but they're getting the news. And it says, great mourning among the Jews with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. The Jewish people were wailing and mourning and crying out. When you're like that, you cry out to the Lord. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to ask the Lord to help you. They mourned, they fasted, they cried, they wailed, they dressed in sackcloth, they put ashes on themselves. What do you do when you hear bad news? A lot of times we call somebody, we cry. We do a lot of things. We panic. Well, these people heard the worst news that they could possibly hear. And in verse 4, it says, so we're looking at, I look at this kind of like a stack of pictures of a vacation to Hawaii. In the first stack of pictures, you're looking at the water. The second stack of pictures, you're looking at all the shows and stuff that you went to. And in the third stack of pictures, you're looking at family. It's all the same trip, but you're looking at different things that are happening basically at the same time on the same trip. So this is what we're looking at now. Mordecai is wailing and mourning. The Jewish people are wailing and mourning. And now we're going to look at another stack of cards. Pictures. Everything's happening at the same time. And we go to Esther. Her maids and her eunuchs came and told her what had happened, and she was deeply distressed. So she sent garments to clothe Mordecai and take his sackcloth away from him. But he wouldn't accept them. You had to dress correctly in order to be able to enter the king's gates. And she wanted him to come in and talk to her. Well, he wouldn't. He would not accept the clothes. She wanted to talk to him about the situation and maybe bring it to a conclusion of some type, but he wouldn't come in. He went as far as the front of the gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. That was in verse 2. So Esther calls one of the eunuchs and that had been appointed her, and she gave him a command. I think that's awesome. Esther's now commanding. She commands this eunuch concerning Mordecai. She says, go and learn what is going on. Go to him and find out. So he went out to Mordecai, and Mordecai told him all that had happened. And he told him the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to destroy the Jews. And he also gave him a copy of the decree for their destruction, which was given even at Shushan where they were. And he wanted him to show it to Esther and explain it to her. I wanted to bring that out. I studied history again, and some of the history books say that they don't believe Esther could read. Of course, I don't know if that's true, but it's very interesting because she sent the eunuch out to talk to Mordecai to find out what happened, and he tells the eunuch, but he also gives him a copy of the decree and tells the eunuch to explain it to Esther. He said, I want you to show it to her and explain it to her, that he might command her to go into the king and make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. So what Mordecai wants her to do is go before the king and tell him that she wants mercy for her people. So the eunuch returns, and he tells Esther what Mordecai said, and Esther speaks to the eunuch, and she gave him a command for Mordecai. I mean, this poor guy's running back and forth, being the messenger here. And in verse 11 it says, all the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman, this is what Esther wanted the eunuch to tell Mordecai. She says, anyone knows that any man or woman who goes in to the inner court to the king who has not been called, he has but one law. He will be put to death, except the one whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I also have not been called to go into the king for 30 days. So what she says, she tells Hatach, the eunuch, to give this command to Mordecai. She says, tell him that I can't go to the king. I haven't been called to the king. You can't go to the king. He will kill you if you go into his gates unannounced. And she says, and besides, I have not gone into the king in 30 days. Found that very interesting. There was a law that you could not go to the king unless you have been called. But she indicates that she hasn't gone in for 30 days. I wonder how she knew that she had not been called for 30 days. Maybe she kept track. Maybe she had kind of fallen in love with him. I don't know. And she kept track. But she hadn't seen him in 30 days. Maybe it was her cycle. Maybe she knew from her cycle that she hadn't seen him in 30 days. Now, a scepter is a rod or a staff. It's highly decorated, and it indicates royal authority, and you hold it out, and if the king holds it out to you, and you are to touch the tip of it, and that means that you can have access to the king. So Mordecai sends a message back to Esther. I feel bad for this poor old eunuch. And here's what he said. And so they told Mordecai Esther's words, and Mordecai told them to answer Esther. Another message here. Do not think in your heart that you will escape the king's palace any more than any of the other Jews. So Mordecai sends a very simple message back to her, telling her, look, if you don't go into him and you don't try to resolve this and save your people, you're going to die. So one way or other, if he kills you for walking in unannounced, you're dead. Or Haman's going to see that you're dead. So he's acting like her father. And then in verse 14, this is a star verse in the book of Esther. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? That's God's appointment, God's anointing here. God's name is not mentioned outright in the book of Esther because the Jews were afraid of the very thing that is happening. I personally see God all over this book. Praise him. He is everywhere and he's in control of all things. I, for one, am so thankful for that. And here's another witness of God in the book of Esther. So Esther sends another reply to Mordecai. Esther told them to reply to Mordecai. I think it would have been easier if they'd just gotten on the phone. But she says, go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So here Esther says, gather all the Jews, and we're all going to fast. When you fast, you're praying, you're seeking the Lord. Here again, here's the Lord on this book. She's willing to do exactly what she asked the people to do for 3 days, not just during the day, but days and night. Eat nor drink for this amount of time. Why else would they want to do that other than they're seeking the Lord? So she waited at least 3 days, and that was after Mordecai gathered all the Jews together, which must have taken a little bit of time. So let's move on to the next verse. Verse 17. So Mordecai went his way, and he did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Who's commanding who? I think it's very interesting that Mordecai had been commanding Esther at the beginning of this little running back and forth storytelling, and now she's commanding him. But I can see Queen Esther holding her head high, shoulders back, and stating, I will do this. I have no choice. Therefore, if I die, I die. She was a brave woman. God never promises us that doing the right thing will be easy, but we must do the right thing, easy or not. Sometimes we just have to do what we have to do. I felt that way personally many times in my life. I just have to do what I have to do. All the queen asked for was support from her people for 3 days as they fasted and most certainly probably prayed, in my opinion. How do you feel about Esther right now? I'm very proud of her myself. I don't know how you feel about her, but I'm very proud of her. I hope you're enjoying our little lesson each day. We're going to move on into chapter 5, and you'll have to forgive me if, I'm not speaking properly or so forth and so on. I'm trying to do this lesson just by looking at a wall and speaking into a microphone. I don't have an audience before me. Sometimes it's a little challenging to get going on the lesson when it's like that. So just hang with me. Hopefully I'll get a little more used to this, and we'll move along. So next one will be chapter 5, and we're going to enter the king's courts. Bye, y'all.